Welcome to the Tuning In podcast, where we talk alignment, intuition, and our internal guidance system. We cover woo-woo topics in an approachable and practical way. I'm your host, Dana Evans of Alignful.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tuning In podcast. Welcome. So let's see, this week, I feel like the weeks are going by so fast and the days are going by so fast. I, as a projector, that's my human design type, I have this tendency to go into like phases of learning and not learning, and call it my projectorness or not. I kind of relate it to that. I'm a projector, but needless to say, most of last year was more of like an integration year, and even the first quarter of this year. But all of a sudden, something shifted for me recently, and I like jumped in on all of the trains. I'm doing it's called Peak Performance Boot Camp with one of my fellow coaches, Kimmy Morton, and it's really all about work-life integration and how to create more fun, more joy, more productivity, but not through working harder, but through just being more mindful and intentional about both your work and your rest. And I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but I definitely have this tendency to half work and half rest all the time, which means I'm never fully rested and I'm never fully productive. And gosh, it's really frustrating because I love to rest and have downtime, but I also love the work I'm creating. And when I'm working in this way with a lot of distractions, it's just not effective. So I'm really excited to be a part of her boot camp and to shift that. I'm also in this book club with a friend, Sarah Lynn, and it's called Go Beyond the Book Club. And it's all about reading like entrepreneurial business and marketing books. And this month we're reading This is Marketing by Seth Godin. Oh my God, I love it. I'm learning so much. And then I just signed up to work with another coach of mine, Jen Conger, and she's an intuitive social media coach, which, come on guys, that's like the coolest description ever. And I'm working with her really to be more intentional with my own social media and like how I interact and share with everyone. I love sharing on Instagram in particular, if you guys follow me at Dana_Evans. And I'm just looking to be a little more mindful and intentional and clear about what I'm sharing. And I'm just excited about that. I want everything that I'm sharing. I want the messaging around like inner voice work and its value and why you might want to be a part of it and why you would want to do these beanbag sessions and like why you would even want to work with me or hear what I have to say. I want that to be really clear. So full transparency on the podcast, everything I do, I don't do it in a vacuum alone. I mean, I very much rely on coaches and friends and programs to help me up level, to help my own growth, to help connect to what I desire. And I just think it's good to remember that because it's so easy to look at someone from the outside and be like, oh, well, their life is XYZ, insert your story. And it must be easy for them because of XYZ. But so many of us, we get to where we are who we are because of the people that we surround ourselves with. So I'm just wanting to be more transparent about who I work with and, you know, how I'm shifting and growing and how I'm leaning on friends and family and coaches to do that. And you don't have to do it all alone. It's so valuable to just talk to other people, and even the smallest thing is valuable. And don't underestimate the power of someone else's perspective when you've invited that for you. And actually, this is what this week's episode is all about. So, learning about other people's perspectives, learning the value of coaching in order to shift your own stories. So, without further ado, let's go to the episode. Happy Woo Woo Wednesday. So this week, I want to talk a little bit about the stories we tell ourselves. Oh my Lord, do we tell ourselves stories? And the thing with stories is that you often don't realize it's a story. Because the story is based on a belief, and a belief is a thought that you've thought over and over again until you're no longer actively thinking it and you believe it to be true. And beliefs are great. They're effective. They can do a lot for us, but they can also hold us back, because when a belief becomes a story that you're continually telling yourself, then it can hold you back. Because if it's not a story that's helping you, and it's one that's, creating limited beliefs around your abilities, your lifestyle, what is and is not true in your life, then you can have a problem. And I think it's so valuable to start to look at anything that you think or say about yourself and your life and your situation, to start shifting it from this is fact, this is the way it is, to this is the way I see it, this is my perspective, this is my belief, this is my perspective of my current experience. Do you see the difference there? One is acting as if all is fact and it is so, and the other is acting on the belief, because this too is a belief, just so you know, the belief that it is not just the way it is, but rather it is the way you are experiencing or seeing it. The reason I like to make that distinction is because if things are just the way they are, and if this is just like, well, life is hard right now. I can't make money during coronavirus. I can't leave my house, so I'm not happy. This is my only opportunity to have this experience, and it's being ruined by coronavirus. Just as an example, since we're in that right now. If you believe those are just facts, then that puts you in a victim mindset, and it puts you in a limiting position, hence limited belief, that you can't do anything and it's just the way it is. Now, you have every right to believe that and to choose that, but I would challenge you to say, is this really true? And just ask the question. Because for every person who's feeling all the things I just described, there's also a person who's like, wow, my business is thriving right now. My relationships are doing really well. Wow, this is a really good opportunity for me to look at the stuff that I've been ignoring. And it may be challenging, but I'm up for the challenge. There's a different perspective. Like, this is my first time, going through this situation, and here I am. And it's not what I expected. It's not what I thought I wanted, but is there something that I can learn here? And is there something valuable within this? It's so different to look at it from that perspective. Now, the tricky thing with a belief and a story that we tell ourselves is that story becomes a reality and we do believe it to be true. So it becomes a little bit challenging to detect the BS of the belief system. It becomes difficult to detect that because you don't necessarily know it's a belief. You think it's just truth and it's fact. So just listening to this episode is going to start to get you questioning those types of beliefs. And let me just give a few. So the reason I was wanting to do this episode is I am definitely experiencing some upper limit issues right now, and some beliefs are showing up because I have been busier than I'm used to being. And it's coming from the fact that I'm doing quite a few new programs right now, about 3 or 4. 2 of them are directly with coaches I'm working with for myself. One is called Tribe, and it's a membership program. And I'm actually going through that because I have a little coaching group that I'm going to be walking through the Tribe membership program. So I'm coaching this group of students for 6 weeks. And this is part of the James Wedmore work I do. In order to coach them, I need to go through the program that they're going through just so I kind of know what they're up to. So that's on my plate. I do regularly coaching in the BBD, Business by Design community. I have my own clients now that I'm working with these emotional release sessions and the deep inner voice sessions. And of course, I have my members in my membership and all of that. It's all connected. It's all beautiful. It's all what I love to do. But all of a sudden, I've noticed in the past week that an old belief of mine is surfacing. And it is a limiting belief. And let me tell you why. The belief is if I'm too busy with work, then I won't have time to rest and play. Now think about that for a second. If my story is if work gets too busy, I don't have enough time to rest and play, aka do the things I love doing, do you think that is a really good thought and story to have if I want to grow my business? No, that is directly against what I say I want, which is to grow my business, to have more clients, and to work with more people and help more people. Because what I'm saying is, if I get too busy, if I have too many clients, if I have too much work, then I can't enjoy my life. So suddenly that belief has broken work and play into two separate categories. And it also assumes that work is not something that I enjoy, right? And is not something that is equivalent to play. And I believe that this is an old story because for many years of me working for other people and jobs, I really didn't necessarily love what I was doing. I was good at it, but it wasn't filling me up. And I definitely saw work as something that was challenging, frustrating, took away from my own things that I wanted to do, and was something that just had to be done and gotten out of the way so I could earn money and then make space to play. So that's an old story. That was an old experience. But now I am literally doing what I've always wanted to do. I'm coaching people. I'm helping people tune inward and connect to their higher selves and live from that space. And I'm working with people every day and seeing their progress and their experience and the joy. And I love doing it. And I'm doing programs for myself and continuing my learning and growth. And all of this is equivalent to joy activities for me. Yet my old story says that work takes away from joy. But see, even as I can logically explain the disconnect of my belief and my reality, I'm still noticing that belief creep up. And I'm like, oh God, I have so much I have to do this week. I'm nervous and I don't necessarily want to do it because then I'm not going to have any downtime. And so what I do is that I procrastinate the work, but I'm not fully relaxed in my downtime. And then I don't get my work done that I enjoy. And then I also don't get to rest, which I enjoy. And then it's like I spend the whole day in this frustration, this conflict between do I work or do I rest? And it's so interesting to witness. That story is not serving me. And as I've become, quote, busier, the story has gotten louder. But if I know that my desire is to grow my business, to impact and help and work with more people, I have to shift that story. But before I can shift the story, I have to first recognize the belief, which is where I am right now. Luckily, I have some coaches to help me. I also have been talking to my inner voice about this. And my inner voice is so interesting because I said, well, what should I tell people I do, inner voice? Because I feel like this inner voice work is confusing and that people might not see the value. And my inner voice says, you help people find joy. The joy that is already within, the joy that is there for them to explore, the joy that is for them. Okay, inner voice, thanks. My mind does not like that answer. But going from that place is like, you can always, when you have this old belief in this story, once you've identified it, you can go inward and start to ask your own inner voice for its perspective. Just like with coaching, the value of working with someone who's trained to help you in these situations is they're giving a perspective that you may not have seen because you're so in it. And so they're not saying you're wrong, right? When you work with someone as a coach, they're not saying you're wrong. They're saying, hey, I totally get how you could be looking at the sidewalk from the west and you're seeing the sun. But when I look at it from the east, I'm seeing whatever. Okay, that was a horrible example. But the point being, you're just giving yourself another perspective. And by working with someone, by choosing to work with someone as a coach, you're saying, okay, I'm open to you showing me another perspective that might help me get out of my belief system. For example, Kimmy, who I'm working with in her peak performance program, is when I said this story of work takes away from fun, she was able to challenge me and say, so are you saying that you never can have fun when you're working? I was like, oh, just that simple question could kind of stop me in my tracks. I'm like, well, no, I often am having fun, even though it's quote work time. And little questions like that will help to dismantle the belief bit by bit. But for the most part, we're so in our own lives, our own belief systems, our own stories that we can't pull ourselves out of that and actually ask those really important questions. Now, as we do this more and more, we get better at it. But the quickest and most effective way to kind of dismantle a belief is to challenge it and to have someone challenge it who's not in that belief themselves. So it's really, really powerful to have a coach. But I consider our inner voices to be our own coaches. It's just you, but as we've talked about before, it's just a different frequency. So the inner voice isn't in all the drama. My inner voice is not stressed out about having too much work to do and like it's not going to have fun. My inner voice is like, life is fun because it's life. Like everything is fun to my inner voice. And so when I tune into the frequency of my inner voice and ask the same questions, it's not concerned. And it can give me that guidance as well of like, okay, this is okay. This is okay. This is okay. You can have joy and have work. They don't have to be separate. They're one and the same. It's the only thing that's different is your perception of it. Who says that having more work equals less fun? Maybe in my past experience, but in my present reality, more work is just more excitement. You know, it's like the ability for me to impact more people, to increase my income, to practice my skills and hone in on everything that I've done and learned in the past and really work from that place. And how is that frustrating or upsetting or stressful? It's not, except my mind is used to that being the story. So when I tune into my inner voice, it can share that other perspective of like, no, this is fun. Let it be fun. Let it be easy. Let it be joyful. Let it be an experience. Let it be exactly what it needs to be, for it is here for you. I guess that was my inner voice sharing. Okay. So just remember that as beautiful as it is to go outside for guidance, and I do often go outside for guidance, I like to do that. I like other people's perspectives. I like to take programs and courses and learn and read and all of these amazing things. But it isn't the only way. And as much as I'm sending my energy outward, I'm also reminding myself to equally send my energy inward, to check in with my inner voice, to debunk my own stories. And even to check in with my inner voice to point out my own stories. The inner voice likes to say, well, the mind likes to think this. And it can just share that with me. And that's why I like to do the inner voice work, is because my mind, your mind is on a different channel than your inner voice, meaning it thinks it knows what it thinks the inner voice would think. But it just doesn't. The mind doesn't know what the inner voice knows. That's why we turn the channel and tune into that frequency if we want a different perspective. Two sides of the same coin, one's heads, one's tails. And we can flip the coin on any day and decide which to listen to. Okay, stories. We live in story. Bring up something right now that you believe to be true and then check, is that a story? I had a friend of mine and I love her to death. She said to me the other day, she said, this is my only chance at maternity leave. If I ever have another maternity leave, I'm going to have a toddler running around and it won't be the same. And I listened and received from a friend perspective, not a coach perspective. But after she said that, because she's in maternity leave now during coronavirus and she's literally locked in her home, after she said that, I was like, oh, that's a story that she's continually telling herself, which is in fact true. This is her only maternity leave without another child, and it is happening during coronavirus, and there are circumstances, right? Circumstances are the facts, but then our interpretation of the facts are what create the story. And one story that comes with those facts is, I'm not getting to do X, Y, and Z. This is harder. This is less enjoyable. This could have been better. This should have been different. And the story points, whatever those are actually creating more pain because they're creating resistance to what is. Meanwhile, there's another story that she is also experiencing, which is how cool that I get all of this time off with my baby. And how cool is it that my husband and I both get to be home for probably 6 months or more and get to watch this baby grow? And how magical is it for our family to really create its own unit right here, right now, when normally we'd have to be going back to work, we'd have to be getting a nanny, right? That's the difference. Those are two stories, same circumstance. And neither story is more right or more wrong. It's just an interpretation of the experience. But then the question you get to ask, you can honor both experiences. You can honor the loss, right? And the pain that comes with things not being as you expected. But then the question is, which story do you want to lean into and continue living? Which is going to help you more of the time? Which do you want to believe more? Which story do you want to guide this story of this time? So when you look back, that's the experience you remember. Does that make sense? We always are going to have circumstance. There are the facts, like the facts are the facts. It's like these are what are exactly what's happening without any interpretation. And then our interpretation, how we choose to see the facts and our emotional response to those thoughts about the facts, that's what creates the joy, right? Or the frustration or the sadness. There is a filter in which we place upon our vision, our view of things that impacts what we're experiencing. Day to day, these little things that we think and we experience, the more we think them repetitively, the more we start to believe them to be true, the more we become a victim to that story and that system, and the more we create pain in our lives. Do you see the connection here? I'm so passionate about this because I'm like, look, I live so many stories. We all do. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with anyone's perspective. It's just that it's important to realize that we could choose and change our perspective without changing the facts. The resistance to what is what always creates the pain. Abraham Hicks says, resistance is creating the pain. And you can choose then, if you have the resistance, if you don't like what is, you can either, if you can do something about it, do. And if you can't, let go. right? If you can't do something about the situation, why sit in frustration with the situation? Well, because I don't want it and I want to fix it. Well, if we know that what we focus on grows, why would we want to focus on what we don't want? And the law of polarity says, just like the two sides of the coin, to every good there is a bad. To every bad there is a good. Which means it's just which side of the coin you're looking at. So for every person who's in this situation right now and being like, wow, this is really hard and horrible, that also means that there is something beautiful in it. It's not always easy to see. We're trained. We are trained, evolutionarily trained, but also trained from birth, from society, from our parents, from media, to look for the bad. We are trained to see the problems. We are trained to prepare for the worst. And all I'm saying is those preparations, right? Those thought processes become so ingrained, the pathway becomes so ingrained that we forget, even in the smallest of things, that there is good. We forget that we are so in our pain that we've created that there is any good. And it's just so interesting, guys. It's so interesting. I'm not lecturing because I live this life. I live this all the time. And I'm like, wow, why am I focusing on all the things that John is doing wrong? It's so easy to see those and to dismiss all the things that he's doing right. Okay? It's so easy to look at my business and to say, ugh, I should be further along. Why can't I figure this out? What am I doing wrong? Than to look at, man, look how far I've come. Look what I've created. Look what I'm doing, and imagine how much more I can create in the future. It's easier to see the problem than to look for the solution. It's easier when the storm comes to see the clouds and say, well, the sun didn't come out today, than to think, well, the sun is always there. The clouds are just here today. We create these stories by telling ourselves the same thing over and over and believing it to be true and then not seeing another perspective. But there's always another perspective. There's another perspective to the perspective I'm sharing with you, and that is the perspective of reality is what is, and if it sucks, and that sucks. I don't choose to believe that, but if you do, guess what? You're right. I said this on last week's podcast episode. Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Whether you believe this is true or not, you're right. Because your belief is ultimately what is creating your experience. Your belief about a situation is going to reinforce your belief about the situation. So the harder you believe it's a problem, the more problem it's going to be. The more you start to look at the other side of the coin and say, actually, there is something good in this, the more you're going to highlight the good, the more the clouds are going to part so you can see the sun. The sun is always there. The sun is always there. The clouds just get in the way. And the clouds are the stories we tell ourselves, the resistance that we create to what is. And it's not simple. This isn't simple. And I would encourage you as you're going through this is start with small things. We don't have to change your belief about your childhood, right? Or about your parents or about politics or religion or, even big situations. It's all emotion based, right? So we don't have to start with these big beliefs because you're not there yet. It's a stepping stone. It's very hard to start to shift this at first. That's my belief, right? Which means I'm probably making things harder for myself than they need to be. But start with something small, like the belief that if you can't go outside right now, that you're going to not have any fun. or that there's not enough open space. Well, what does that mean? There's not enough open space for you outside. I mean, can you step out into your driveway? Is that enough open space? What's enough? How much open space do you want? If you did have open space, would you take advantage of it? See all these ways we can question our thoughts, and we can start questioning them before they become beliefs and stories that will help us along the way. But start with something small. Start with something like, I don't have time to read the books that I want to read. That was the story of mine. And guess what? I'm reading 30 minutes every single morning now. And I'm like blazing through books. On Instagram, I post my books each month. And 30 minutes is just like step one. Then I'm finding more time in pockets throughout the day to read and to listen to audiobooks. And I'm like, wow. So it was just my belief that I didn't have time to read the books that I wanted. But once I questioned that belief, I created time. The time was always there. It's just my belief was that I didn't have time, so I didn't. See that? It's kind of trippy. But the point being, our lives are magical, and our perception really is important. It's so important. And even if your perception is that not everything you think is true, question your own thoughts, question the stories you tell yourself, and start to ask, is this true? Do I need this? Is this serving me? Is this serving me? Is this story that I keep telling myself and repeating to others helping me? What is it doing for me? And is it doing what I want it to do? My story about more work equals less joy and fun time is not serving me. It served an old purpose. It's serving me in keeping me safe and keeping me from growing my business. It is serving me that way. It's serving me in holding me back and keeping me into the victim mode of like, well, I can't do any more work because then I won't have time to have fun. That's serving that purpose, but that's not the purpose I want to be serving. I want to serve my higher purpose. I want to serve my higher self. I want my thoughts and beliefs and stories to serve my bigger vision of life. And on this one single story that we're talking about, it's I want to grow my business. I want to have more work. I want to create more joy within the work that I do. So it's integration of work and life, not balance of work and life. I want the joy in every aspect. And I want to release that story. And to release it, we must challenge it. And we must look for counterexamples of that story. And it's so good to find those counterexamples by talking to someone, by talking to other people who don't just say, I feel you, I feel you, I feel you. That reinforces your belief. But talking to coaches, right? There's friend mode and there's coach mode. Talking to coaches can really help dismantle and shift that belief so you can truly be free. Talking to your inner voice can help you see that belief from a completely different perspective so you can let it dissolve. We don't need to hold on to these stories. We don't need to be identified by what is not serving us. We can choose to shift our perspective. And shifting your perspective doesn't harm you. It's not bad because you can say, hey, how can I grow in my business? Right? That can be a similar question that's working toward the positive that will serve me versus a story of what am I doing wrong? Because when you ask what you're doing wrong, you're going to get answers. But you can get a similar result by asking, what am I doing wrong? To asking, what can I do better? See what I did there? What can I do better? How can I grow more? How can I improve versus how have I screwed up in the past? In this simple situation of I don't have enough open space, well, how can I make the most of the space I do have? Oh, right? I don't have enough time. Well, what can I do with the time that I do have? How can I use my time in a way that is more effective for me and feels better? It's not saying you're wrong, right? It's not judging. It's just saying, how can I look at this differently? And that's always a question you can ask. At the end of the day, when we're playing with anything that's making us feel horrible, And if you don't want to feel horrible, if you want to feel horrible, I mean, I'm all for feeling our feelings, right? We don't have to change everything immediately. Please don't take that as what I'm saying. But when we are feeling horrible regularly all the time and we start repeating a story about why we're feeling horrible, you either need to change it, accept it, or shift your perspective. And so when you're finding yourself in that loop, the question can say, how can I look at this differently? One final thought, because I really wanted to share this. I saw someone post the other day, which I just loved this. And I was like, oh, I meant to comment because she said, I'm feeling really anxious about this situation. And then in the same sentence or in the same paragraph of text, she said, I'm anxious to get back to working with you guys. And I thought, holy smokes, look how we just used anxious in two ways. One was implied like I'm nervous and fearful and uncomfortable and like I'm anxious, I'm uneasy. And the other was I'm anxious, like I'm looking forward to it and I'm excited and I want what's next, like I can't wait. Have you guys ever considered that? How can I look at this differently? Using a word like anxious as part of your story. I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious. Well, what do you mean? Do you mean I'm anxious to get back to work and excited? Or do you mean I'm anxious and uneasy? Let's break that story down and figure out what we're really talking about here. Because if the general story is, I have anxiety, I'm anxious, you've just put a giant blanket that you've set yourself up for failure because it's like, well, what the heck does that mean? And what does it mean to you? And what does it mean in this moment? And what does it mean in this situation? And we first have to figure out what is that story telling? What are each of the little narratives of that story? So then we can start, because I can't just dismantle you're anxious with a belief. We need to know what that means. And I just loved how she put that, and I don't know if she did that intentionally, but she basically contradicted herself in the same sentence in a really beautiful way, because it's like, yeah, guys, even something that we have a general negative association with, which is anxious and anxiety, can have two meanings, right? Right there. Two sides, one coin. Law of polarity. For every good, there's a bad. For every bad, there's a good. There are two ways to look at it. And she put it right there. And I can't think of a better way to end this podcast as asking, what do I really mean when I say that? And how can I see this differently? I love you guys so much. I hope you're able to follow along with this episode. It was a story in itself as I was kind of going along a winding path, but I hope it makes sense and maybe gives you an opportunity to start to look at the elements of your life and be like, is this true? Is this what I want? And how can I look at it differently? And is it serving me? And is it serving me the way I want it to be serving me? I have so much love for all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a beautiful day. Or a bad one, depending on how you choose to experience it. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tuning In podcast. As always, if this would resonate with anyone you know, please share the episode. You can follow along with my journey on Instagram at Dana_Evans, or find me on my website at alignful.com.